About 1 month ago, I made the decision to switch my entire second brain from Apple Notes to Obsidian. Now, if you've been in the world of book tech and PKM, you may have come across this meme that makes fun of people for switching apps all the time and always ending up back in Apple Notes, but I'm pretty confident that's not going to be me. Now, I've been a very loyal Apple Notes user for several years now, and I recently realized that this app has actually been holding me back in several different ways. In today's video, I want to give you a bit of a sneak peek into my second brain, as well as why it was so compelling for me to switch platforms all of a sudden. The term second brain sounds a little bit weird at first, but I actually think it's something that everybody should have. Think of it as a digital second notebook that you have that basically holds all the random thoughts and ideas that you don't really want to invest too much energy in remembering in your actual brain. Our actual brains are very good at critical thinking and synthesizing ideas, but when it comes to long-term storage, they are not very good at this at all. Unless you have a photographic memory, it's going to be really hard to remember everything you come across, but if you invest a little extra time in writing things down and putting them into a digital notebook, you'll have these memories and thoughts and ideas ready for you at a moment's notice for a lifetime. In terms of my personal journey with building a second brain, I learned about this concept from a guy named Tiago Forte, who I was very lucky enough to meet a few years ago. Basically, in 2021, I was getting married and I had a lot on my plate, and I needed a way to write things down and keep things organized so I could remember all these little details for everything that we're planning. At the time, I basically copied exactly what Tiago Forte was doing. I used Evernote, and I used that as my second brain for a little while. I'll spare you all the details, but I eventually landed in Notion and then Apple Notes in 2022, and I stuck with Apple Notes for a few years up until today. During this time, I really began expanding my second brain to include all aspects of my life. I would write things down for my day job. I would create notes for the restaurants I was eating at, keeping track of my favorite foods. I was writing ideas down for YouTube videos and things like that. Everything from my life was ending up in the Apple Notes app. Now, the way I organized all my Apple Notes was by using the para method, again by Tiago, and this was a really great method for a long time, but I recently came across some challenges with it, which is why I am changing systems now. The two biggest challenges I kept facing was my notes would always be moving around and my folders kept changing. I would always rename my projects or my areas or my resources. It just never stayed very consistent for very long. But secondly, all the notes I was taking were basically low value notes. I wasn't really investing much time in revisiting my old notes. I just kept writing random back of the napkin style notes into my second brain that I would never look at again. Now, Voice Notes is also a very amazing app. I've been using it for a few months now. It's basically a voice memo app, but with a built-in AI that can actually understand the things that you're recording. One random day, I was recording a voice note in this app, and the app suggested a related note from something I recorded months ago that was completely from a different part of my life, but the ideas were connected. This was a huge light bulb moment for me. Seeing these two notes that I never would have connected on my own just come together seamlessly was a huge breakthrough for me. I'm capturing all these ideas in my second brain, but they're not linked together in any kind of way. These links and connections are the most important part. This is where all the magic happens in a second brain. Once I realized the power of creating links and connections between all my notes, I really decided to very seriously look into leaving Apple Notes and going somewhere else where creating links was a more native part of the platform. Just by sheer coincidence, around the same time, one of my subscribers emails me about this app they've been using called Obsidian and how much they've been enjoying it, and I decided to look into it. I've always heard of Obsidian, but never give it a serious thought because I was very comfortable in Apple Notes, but now I had a reason to investigate this app a bit more. Obsidian is an app that is literally designed for creating links and connections between all of your notes, and it was something I realized very quickly that was exactly what I wanted for this purpose, and I decided to go into it, and I spent the next few weeks of my life diving into the Obsidian rabbit hole. Now, when setting up my Obsidian vault, I did have a few requirements that I wanted to stick to. The first one being simplification. I wanted to keep things as simple as possible, so I just decided to create one folder for all my notes and heavily rely on links to organize everything. The idea behind this approach is that your notes will naturally cluster and create little clumps on their own based on the links that you give them. Instead of giving a top-down approach where you decide on the folders in advance, this is a bottom-up approach where your notes are essentially organizing themselves. Obsidian actually has this graph view that I really enjoy looking at. It's a really fun way to visualize all your notes and see all the connections you're making, and you could actually see the clusters forming around ideas that are really important in your life. My second requirement for Obsidian was making sure I focus on evergreen note-taking. In Apple Notes, the vast majority of my notes notes were fleeting notes. These are notes that are just very quick thoughts that I wrote down that I never look at again. They were very basic and very unpolished. With evergreen notes, the idea is that you want to create little bite-sized pieces of knowledge that will last for several years into the future. And I really wanted to embrace this early on, getting away from the fleeting notes habit, instead really investing a little bit of extra time polishing up my notes and making sure they're serving value for the long term. Now, to be clear, fleeting notes are really important too, but what I do now is I actually process them in an inbox and I delete them if they're not useful anymore, or I polish them and put them in my evergreen folder only when they're ready to be saved. The last thing I want to talk about is this idea of publishing my notes and making my second brain available on the internet for anyone to access. In my book club, we just recently finished the book called The Notebook by Roland Allen. This is a really great book about the history of note-taking in notebooks, and it really inspired me to open up my digital second brain for anyone to access and have it shareable, so it's not just private to me, but hopefully helpful for others as well. By the way, if you want to join my book club, it's completely for free. We read one nonfiction book every month. A link down below with all the details. Now, there was a story in that book about Leonardo da Vinci, who we all probably know for his artwork, but he was actually also a very avid note taker and researcher. He had tons of notebooks with research on the most random ideas that you could think of. The problem was that his notebooks were never preserved properly, and all that work he put into those notebooks were never used by anybody else besides himself, and they were basically lost to history. There are a few of them that are still around today, which are really rare and collectible, but obviously the vast majority of his library is no longer here, and who knows how useful that knowledge could have been for other people. Now, my notes are not nearly as sophisticated as Leonardo da Vinci's, but I still think there's value in publishing a second brain. Even if you're just some random person on the internet, it does make a difference. You never know who might stumble upon it and get something useful from it. You're putting all this effort into capturing knowledge. You might as well make it shareable. Now, I don't share everything. I have a second private folder that I use as well for private notes, but the vast majority of my notes are made public. An unintended side effect of this publishing thing that I'm doing is making sure my notes are polished a little bit more. It's holding me accountable to make sure my notes actually look and feel like they're worthy of being published, and I actually should be doing that anyway for myself, but now I have an extra reason to do that. Now, I will leave a link down below to my second brain if you're interested in poking around, but also leave a comment if you want to see more videos about personal knowledge management or Obsidian. This is a new topic that I'm really passionate about, so I'm looking forward to talking about it more, but only if you want to see more videos like this. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this video interesting, you may also find my video about ChatGPT and using it for school interesting as well. Link for that on the screen right now. Thanks so much. I'll see you next time.